The aftermath of the Great War was harsh for the defeated nations. While the Treaty of Versailles was harsh on Germany, a lot of people tend to forget how devastating the Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye was to Austria. Being one of the defeated nations, Austria was left in a state of despair, as the majority of its territory was lost to either secession groups or to other victorious nations. Key economic regions, mainly in northern Slovenia and Bohemia, were lost to secession movements by the Czechs and the Slovenes, leading to the eventual 1921 Austrian hyperinflation. Outside of economics, the loss of the empire's territories, followed by the defeat, left Austria vulnerable, landlocked, economically collapsed, and the rise of nationalism over the next 17 years would lead Austria to the fate of the Germans, which, after the 1934 February uprising, paved the way to the unification with Germany 4 years later. But what if that all never happened? What if, let's say, through making the Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye less harsh on Austria economically, or even having some more reforms passing through the monarchy before the collapse of the empire, we could somehow save democracy within Austria? The main change in this timeline is the territorial loss after the Great War. The empire still collapses, Serbia still unifies with the Croats and Slovenes, and Italy still takes its territory. However, Austria will keep the regions of northern Slovenia, as in this timeline we're going to say that the region is more tied to Austria, as well as more reforms were passed before and during the Great War. As in this timeline, we will say that the majority of the Slovenian population that wishes to secede from Austria would live in the southern regions. This way, Serbia still unifies with the southern Slavs, Italy gets its territory, and with us keeping the northern regions of Slovenia, we can mitigate the rump state theory. For those who don't know, the rump state theory was the theory by a lot of Austrian people that due to the nation losing a lot of territory, being economically destroyed and landlocked, a lot of people didn't think that Austria could prosper by itself, which would cause a lot of pro-unified Germanic parties to rise up, notably the NSDAP of Austria. Another thing we would have to bring up is the economical changes in this treaty. We will say that this time, Austria's economy won't be punished as harshly. We could say that the Entente, wanting to do what it can to keep the two Germanic states separated, would economically help build Austria after the Great War. Would this happen? No, but for the sake of the scenario, it does. This mainly will stem from France wanting to support Austria economically in terms of building up its industry to keep the two Germanic states separated. Now, this would be very, very hard to happen since France would also be rebuilding its country after the Great War. But leading up to the 1930s, this would be something both France and Italy would want to do to keep Austria economically independent and more prosperous than Germany, as well in the terms of Austria, have them more time to Italy, as Mussolini wanted to keep Austria tight, especially with the policies of Austria after the Great Depression, leading more fascist. Something else that would happen in this timeline is we'll say that the Ethiopian War doesn't change Italy's stance on the defense of Austria, as the Brits and French in this timeline would have to look the other way. Now, there is a key reason why I'm doing this, and I'll get into that in a second. With all the changes that we have made, the Nazi Party in Austria would still garner attention with the Great Depression happening, causing an unlikely alliance from the two parties to unite Austria together, the Christian Socialists and the Social Democrats, leading to the Maroon Coalition to squeeze out a victory, defeating the VF and the NSDAPO, as both of those two parties couldn't unify, as the VF wanted to stay independent from Germany, as the Nazis of Austria wanted to unify with Germany. The coalition would be led by the Social Democrat Karl Leine, because he is the starting Democratic leader in HOI4. I mean, I can't really help out with that. It's just what the game did, and when I tried to bypass the focus to have the elections happen, it didn't give me the option to really select anyone. I would have selected probably a Christian Socialist, as I think they were more popular at the time, but we just gotta work with what we got. But he has cool facial hair. Now, to get into the reason on why we are saying that Italy still cooperates for the defense of Austria is because they decided to hop in the war in 1938, and I had to think of a reason to why they would hop in on that war. So yeah, with that out of the way, onto the gameplay. We can say with the current changes we have made in this timeline, Austria is already in the rebuilding phase of its industries come 1936. However, the Phoenix scandals would pop up in February, and the government would kind of have to help bail them out to not worsen the economy as much more as it is. The Germans would then begin the remilitarization of the Rhineland, which would then spark fears in Austria, as this might be a sign that Germany wants to reunify with all Germanic states, as Hitler would make that obviously clear in a bunch of speeches. We would then begin setting up state garrisons in different regions within in the country, as well as building up fortifications along the German border. We would then ask our guarantors if the inevitability of the German invasion would come, would they defend us, and the majority of them would say yes, including the United States, which, like the Italy thing we brought up earlier, was something I didn't expect to happen on historical AI, but it's happening, and yeah, this is weird. The Germans would then demand that we put a Nazi in our government, and when we declined, they then reaffirmed the pressure onto the statement. But again, you know, staying strong to our wills, we say no, and the Germans finally decide to back off. We would then ask our guarantors if we can remilitarize once again, and the guarantors would see that with German aggression being rampant and the Germans wanting to reunify the German speakers, they would give us the ability to rearm ourselves. We would then go ahead and start rebuilding our military and reorganizing it, and yes, a lot of the entire interwar period is just going to be us building up our military. Our government would follow the plans that Alfred Janssen would have in place, and the Germans would be very much against this, which again, we are going to tell the Germans to fuck off. However, I think doing that really made the Germans mad, as they immediately begin focusing on expansionism into Central Europe, specifically Austria. So our military starts to once again build up more forts and prepare for the inevitable. I would begin finishing up our design for our brand new infantry divisions, and I know it's late, but we're going to be focusing on fixing our rail system in northern Slovenia. However, time is now officially up. In February of 1938, the Germans are pushing for Anschluss. This would send a red alarm in the entirety of the capital city of Vienna, as the government would begin mobilizing all divisions that they have to fight against Germany. And at 2 a.m. on April 28th, the Germans would ask for Anschluss, and we would tell them no, straight up. We want to stay independent, we want to stay by ourselves as a separate Germanic nation. And like we stated before the gameplay, Italy would then reaffirm their support for us, which would make me have to force a non-aggression between myself and Germany so that the German AI doesn't get their ass kicked by 1940. We would take this time to constantly add more military factories to our industries to help produce more equipment. And I know it's late, but then we would begin building bombers in 1938. Yeah, it is extremely late to do this, but we're gonna do it anyways. We would then activate militia support within our cities, which totally won't cause a problem at all. No. And unfortunately, instead of also standing up for the little guy, the Allies would just let Germany walk into Czechoslovakia and just let them do whatever they want there. Great job, team. Now they have a bigger border with me. To begin preparing defenses for Austria, we would set our divisions across the river on the capital city of Vienna, as it is the most defensible position in Austria to hold, and I thought the mountains plus the river, as well as their fortifications, would be a really good stopping point to stop the Germans from advancing. However, my biggest betrayal would come when I click on the Germans and I see that the Italians are in the faction. Italy, we signed a defense treaty to prevent them from invading me, and now you're like, oh, you know what? The whole thing, Hitler? Yeah, now it's all forgiven. What? And with the Italians joining the Germans, that would give Germany the complete and total reason to finally invade the nation of Austria, starting the Second World War not with the invasion of Poland, but with the invasion of Austria. In the beginning of the war, our army did exceptionally well. We fell back to the mountains, and on the river line near Vienna, our army was able to hold significantly well. I even went to go check on the casualty counter, and it was 905 to 16k. Holy shit. I would begin moving troops around to try and make sure our line stayed as fortified as possible, as we are starting to lose some battles in certain regions, which would work for the short period of time. Another thing that definitely sucks is that with Italy joining the Axis, I can't get no troops or supply from the Allies, as I have no coastal regions for French or British troops to land in Austria, so we're kind of just on our own for the time being. And this would show as our fronts around Vienna would completely collapse, causing me to fall back into other defensive areas to try to protect Vienna as much as I could. However, even though casualty-wise we were winning the battle, we could not hold Vienna for long, as seeing the writing on the wall, we had to pull back to more defensive approaches around the mountains. Another bad thing is northernmost army would also be completely encircled in the mountains, but good for them is that this is a terrain that they are expertly trained in, so it's going to be a very hard fight for the Germans to even try to kill one of my divisions. By January of 1940, the city of Graz would fall into German hands, leading me to be only left with southern Austria, the mountains in the north, and northern Slovenia. This would be a last-ditch effort to hold, as if we lose any more territory, it is probably over for the Austrian government. And again, like earlier, our army would hold very strongly, as we've only lost 29,000 men to Germany's almost 200,000 men combined to the entirety of the Allies, which they cannot really get past our mountainous regions, and the only reason why we fell back was because the Germans were able to spearhead in certain regions that had less defenses than the others. However, all of our defensive preparations went out the window the moment Italy joined the war. We did not have enough manpower to completely cover both fronts, which means the Italians can just walk into the northern Slovenian regions and the southern Austrian regions. And unfortunately, without the manpower to fully throw our troops at the Italian front, the Austrian government would officially collapse, leading us to be a government in exile in the United Kingdom, thus ending this chapter of Austria's history with a sour and bitter defeat and exile.